You've probably read the title of this video and are thinking, what on earth is she on about? But hopefully by the end of this video, it's going to make a little more sense. So The Tiger Who Came to Tea is a beloved children's picture book. It was written and illustrated by Judith and came out in 1968. And the story is about a tiger knocks on the door, a little girl called Sophie goes to the door, opens it up, and he says, "I'm really hungry. Do you think I can come in for tea?" And her mother were just having tea. So she says, "Yeah, we're having tea, come in." But he's very greedy and he drinks all the tea out the teapot and he eats all the food. He then goes to their tap and he drinks all the water out of the tap. He then goes into their cupboards and he eats all the food and then he leaves. And then the father comes home and the mother says, "There's nothing left for your tea because this tiger came today and ransacked our house." And so then it ends with them going to a cafe for something to eat. They then go to the shop to buy some more food and they buy a big can of tiger food just in case the tiger comes back one day. And at the end it says, "But the tiger never came back." And it ends with the words goodbye, 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 which the tiger is playing some kind of lute instrument and the goodbye is coming out of the lute. So this went on to be a very beloved book, and Judith also wrote the Mog books, which are really beautiful as well. I read this book to my children. They absolutely love it. So I decided to look it up and just see what other people had said about it. And you will find so many academic essays saying why this is actually got a much deeper meaning within it. And Michael Rosen, who is a famous author, he actually has spoken about that as well and saying that he thinks it's to do with Judith Kerr's childhood and the threats of Nazis coming to her door. So Judith Kerr was born in Germany. Her family were Jewish and her father was a famous film critic, a play critic, not film, a theatre critic. And he was very well known. And he had told people that he thought this party that were coming in, which were the Nazis, were terrible and that people shouldn't be voting for them. And he just gave his personal opinions for it. Also, he was Jewish. So he was talking about that as well to people. He was openly Jewish and talking about we need to be careful of this party that's coming in. I think it's going to be terrible for Germany. And then they came into power. And when they came into power, they had a kill list. And a kill list was full of people who were just kind of famous people, a lot of them, who had spoken out against them during the election. So Judith Kerr's father, who was a theatre critic, he had spoken out, but he had spoken out not on big podiums in front of people. If you actually research it, he had just spoken to colleagues, to his contemporaries. That was it. He hadn't done big rallies that were anti the party or anything like that. He had just voiced his opinion. And because he had voiced his opinion and it was anti them, they put him on a kill list. And they were going to go to his house, take him away, murder him, and then take his home and everything he belonged because he had betrayed the government. He was a traitor to his country because the country had put that government in. So they used it as anyone who talks against the Nazis, they are a traitor to Germany. So it wasn't they're a traitor to Hitler. It was they're a traitor to Germany. Like they're a threat to our country. They're a terrorist almost. They are posing a threat to our country. And that's the list that he was put on. So they fled and they managed to get away. And the Nazis did come to their house to come and get him, to kill him. But they had already fled by that point. And the Nazis took control of their house. Everything they ever owned, they took everything and they never got that stuff back. And so Judith at the time was 9 years old and her family had fled. And even though they were living in safety, obviously they had been displaced and they had lost everything. And she was still living with this threat that something might happen to her father because the threat was there. And I suppose even after, when years had passed, when people probably said the threat isn't there anymore, you'd still feel it because you had to flee your home. So people think, and they write a lot of academic essays on The Tiger Who Came to Tea is about fleeing Nazi persecution and that the tiger represents the Nazis. And it's this scary figure, a tiger. She didn't choose a bunny rabbit who came to tea. She chose a tiger, a frightening predator. And that he's welcomed into the home and actually he's not the predator, the Nazi that she thought he was, and he has tea and then he leaves. Or the other theory is that he's kind of pillaging the home because he comes in and he drinks all the water out the tap. And then he goes to their cupboard and he has all the food out of the cupboard. And he can't just sit nicely at the table with them and have some tea and cake with them. He has to eat all the cake so there's none left for them. Drink all the tea so there's nothing left for them. So that signifies the Nazis as well, that they can't just have power and influence, that they wanted dominance, full control, dictatorship, and that maybe that's what it represents. And Michael Rosen had said that he thinks Judith Kerr may have done that unknowingly, that it was in her subconscious, and that she didn't know she was writing this story where this tiger is actually a tyrant. That she didn't know that, but in her subconscious, because of what happened during her childhood, maybe that's why she wrote the book that she wrote. I personally don't think it's about the Nazis. Judith Kerr also said it wasn't about the Nazis, yet people still insist on that narrative. Academics, so I understand they're a lot smarter than me. They have 1 million degrees. They probably say, what do you know about literature? You're just sitting in your kitchen. You don't know what you're talking about. I think Judith Kerr's version of events is probably the true version of events. So Judith said it was inspired by her husband was working away. She took her daughter to the zoo. And then when they went home, Judith felt very lonely. She was just at home with this small child. Her husband was away, and she decided to make up a story to her daughter and say, wouldn't it be fun if a tiger came to tea tonight? So it wasn't just the two of us by ourselves again, but the tiger came in. And what if he ate all the cake, drank all the tea? And that's how the story became. And she told the story many times to her daughter before she actually decided to make it into a children's picture book. But because her daughter enjoyed the story so many times, she thought, well, maybe other children would enjoy the story. And she then wrote and illustrated The Tiger Who Came to Tea, which obviously became a bestseller, a very iconic book. I think she's telling the truth. I think it is about a tiger who came to tea. I think the title is so literal, and I think she was inspired by the trip to the zoo, and that was it. I don't think deep down in her subconscious she didn't realise that she was actually I think that's interesting. I think that's an interesting backstory to put to the book, to get a little bit of people talking about it a bit more, but it's such a famous book. I feel you don't even need to do that because everyone already knows the story of the tiger who came to tea. It's probably read to them as a child, or read to them in playgroup, or by their parents, or whatever, or when you have a new baby. That's how I got this book. When I had my first son, someone bought this book for my son, and that's how I got it. So I feel it's so iconic, and now that it's been turned into a film, it was a made-for-TV film, which the film is really good. And it's so iconic that it doesn't need this whole other backstory. And I feel this discussion could also go into when authors release their work into the world and they say, this is what this is about, that people can make it bend to anything else. Because you give up all your freedom and all your control over the book once you publish it into the world, and how you just kind of have to expect that. And I think that's okay. I will read a book, and I'm sure the author loved it, thought it was a fantastic book, got it published, it was amazing. But the book to me, I may feel absolutely nothing for, I may dislike. And I have the freedom of speech to say, I dislike this book. Even though to the author, it's such a huge part of their life. They've managed to get a book published. They think it's a fantastic book. I disagree. And now their book is in my hands, I can put whatever kind of explanation for things within the book that I want. I could say, well, is this based on the author's real life? Or is this the author's true feelings and they're really disguising them behind a character? And that you do give up your expression and control of your work once you do publish it. And Judith obviously knew that and was fine with it, although she did several times say it wasn't about Nazis. She did keep saying it. She didn't say it once, because when I was researching it, on the Wikipedia page, it said that she said it once. And Wikipedia, I feel like, is kind of like the bones of the story. It's not the full story, obviously. So then when you research it, it was quite a few times that actually she said, it's definitely not about my childhood. Let me let everyone know it's not about my childhood. And she reiterated the story of taking her daughter to the zoo. And she did that quite a few times over the years. She's now passed away, so she can't say it anymore. But she did let people know that. And when it was turned into a film, reiterate that academics have wanted to kind of pull it apart and turn it into this almost like this odd thing that it's her subconscious and she doesn't really know she's doing it. So we can't really trust her when she says it's not about her childhood, because she doesn't even know it's about her childhood. It's just what she's brought out, and we can rip apart her life and her having to flee, and that everything she ever wrote has a speck of her childhood trauma within it. When really it's a book about a tiger coming to tea, inspired by a tiger that she had seen that day at the zoo. And this analysing of it, I think people should totally be allowed to. I'm not saying people shouldn't say that or it's disrespectful or anything like that. But it must have been so tiring for Judith throughout her life, and also quite hurtful to be continually reminded of your childhood when you're saying this is just a silly book. It's silly. It's a fun, silly read. To then be continually reminded of your childhood and asked questions about, does it relate to you having to flee the persecution of your father? And it must have been quite heavy when you've written so many lovely fun books. Like the Mog books are just so gorgeous. If you haven't read them, it's about this pet cat called Mog who's very lazy, and the adventures Mog gets into. Also, a Mog eventually does die in the series, and so it's about Mog going up to heaven, and it's just lovely books. And this book is just a lovely book. And to have the heavy burden of people continually putting it towards your childhood. She had never said anything about her childhood. If her father hadn't been well known, but maybe he had been Jewish and persecuted and had to flee for that, then people wouldn't be picking apart this book because they wouldn't know her family history. But it's because her father was known, and so the story of his persecution was out there, and he was put on this very public kill list and known to be on the list, that people seem to pick apart her work and try and find the link, because they think it makes the book deeper meaning, that this can't just be about a tiger who comes to tea. That's too nonsense. That's too silly. Let's try and get into her life, because there's nothing we can take from the book. It's, quite a short book. There's nothing we can pull apart in that. Let's go into her personal life now and delve into that. And does that relate to the book? And you could do that with so many authors. You could find out, okay, well, there's a divorced character in this book, for example. Is the author divorced? She's divorced. She's talking about herself. She is the female character because she's the same age and she's also divorced. And so maybe the things this character is saying in this book about her ex-husband, that's what she thinks of her ex-husband. She hates him. She hates him like the character does. Like, that must be so exhausting if you're an author, thinking about people scurrying around in your personal life to relate it to these fictional books that you've brought out, that you're trying to convince everyone, it is fiction. It's not me. I'm not the woman in the story. It must be exhausting, but I do think people, have the freedom of speech to talk about it. And what do they say? Like, no press is bad. No publicity is bad publicity. Everything is going to help your book in the long run. I'm making a whole video on it. Other people have spoken about the link of the book and her childhood. It has given it its own separate lease of life that the book really didn't need because it's a bestseller. So without anyone talking about the book and a link to her childhood, it was already a successful book, so it didn't need that to be successful. But I suppose the book can go on to so many different things, and when she was writing it, this silly story about a tiger, I'm sure she couldn't even imagine people relating it to her childhood and to the war and her father, and she wouldn't have even imagined that it would take on that life of its own. And that's why she reiterated that it wasn't linked, and she didn't want people to link it, but that once you publish a book, you lose all control of that book, good or bad. People may love it and say, this book changed my life in the best way. Or other people might read it and say, I hated it. I thought it was dreadful. Or I think this woman is talking about herself within the story. And I wonder if I've done that with other books as well. Read a book that I haven't liked or a character that I haven't liked and thought, is this the author? Is the author herself like this? Or this relationship that she's painting as romantic that I actually think is a terrible relationship, maybe this is the relationship she's in her own life. And so she sees it as romantic, and she's not looking from an outsider in like I am in the book, because she's living this reality in real life, not just in the fictional world. And I find that interesting, the link of author and book, how much we know about an author and how that can change our reading experience of the book. That we know this author maybe lived in poverty, and maybe a character within the story, a central thing about it is poverty. So you know you can trust the author's portrayal of that because they've lived that experience. This video is turning into a podcast. It's too long. I'm going on so many tangents. Sorry. I'm doing a video every day in October, HANOWEEN, and so a lot of them are just me sitting down telling my thoughts to a camera, starting with one topic, spiraling off to loads of others. But I'm going to end this video here. Tell me your thoughts on the whole situation, on what you think of it. I don't research authors. I just read the book. I don't normally. The Tiger Came to Tea, I wanted to look it up because I wanted to know kind of a bit of the history of it. It came out in 1968. Did people like it at the time? Or sometimes books, at the time they came out, no one really liked them, but then 10 years later, everyone loves them. Was the author successful in their own time? Because some die, penniless, like Shakespeare, and they don't see the success of their work within their own lifetime. And I think I looked it up around the time Judith died. And so I wanted to know what other works she had done and a bit more about like her literary works. But because so many people have linked her childhood to her works, it comes up when you look her up. But I tend not to research authors. Maybe that should be a whole other video where I should talk about that. About, do you need to know the author's life to enjoy the book? Like if a book is about poverty, but the person writing the book, their parents are very wealthy and they've always lived a very wealthy life, can they really understand the book? But then you could say, well, my thing against that is you could say, someone's writing a book about ghosts, about supernatural things, but they themselves may not believe in ghosts or supernatural. So to say you have to, like Tolkien, he wrote the character of Gollum, but Gollum is a fictional character. Gollum isn't real. And so how can we ever relate to Tolkien? He's writing about a powerful ring and dragons. Has he even met a dragon? I don't think he has. We can't trust his portrayal on dragons and skeletal creatures because they're not real. So how can we ever trust the man? Like you could also say with fantasy, then it becomes like a sticky topic. But I don't really look into the authors. I'm lazy. I just get the book and I just read it. That's it. I don't normally look into their lives. I don't normally think, I wonder if this is them telling me something. Sometimes with political things, the author is trying to get you to go in a political direction with it. And so you're like, oh, this is probably the author's thoughts on this because everyone who opposes this thing is evil and demonized. And then everyone that agrees with it is good. They're an angel walking among us, and the author's politics is kind of shining through in that. But then I don't feel the need to look up the author and be like, okay, well, what are they doing? What have they said about political things? Let me link it to the book. I just am not as interested. Maybe I would get a better reading experience if I was. Maybe it would add a depth and a layer to the reading experience. But I'm on to the next book. A lot of authors that I love, I don't know anything about their person. I don't know anything about Mary Higgins Clark. I know some things about Agatha Christie. I have opinions on Agatha Christie and that disappearance. That needs its own video. But other things, I'm nosy, but I'm not that nosy. you know, I'm on to the next. So this has turned into a podcast. This is too long, but it reminded me I need to make a video on the Agatha Christie disappearance. Need to talk about that in a different video. But I'm going to end this here, and I will see you tomorrow for another video, hopefully less rambly.